Imagine this. You are in the middle of an intimate moment with your partner, and suddenly something feels off. Not emotionally, physically. Your heart is racing, but not in the way it should. You feel a strange tightness, a sense of disconnection from your own body. And afterward, you are left wondering why something that should feel natural and wonderful felt so diminished, so flat, so incomplete. Now here is the part that will stop you in your tracks. Research published in the Journal of Sexual Medicine found that a specific, incredibly common physical habit reduces genital blood flow by up to 50% during sexual activity. 50%, not 10, not 20, half. And the most alarming part is not the number itself. It is the fact that the overwhelming majority of people doing this have absolutely no idea they are doing it. It has become so automatic, so deeply wired into daily life, that it happens without a single conscious thought. And it is silently sabotaging intimacy for millions of people around the world every single day. If you have ever experienced reduced sensation, difficulty with arousal, trouble maintaining physical response, or just a general feeling that your body is not fully showing up during intimate moments, this video was made for you. Stay with me, because what you are about to learn could genuinely transform your health, your relationships, and the way you understand your own body. Hello and welcome. I am a health educator and medical content creator who has spent years studying the intersection of cardiovascular health, sexual wellness, and the nervous system. I have worked alongside physicians, read thousands of pages of peer-reviewed research, and spoken with countless individuals who were struggling with issues they were too embarrassed to bring up with their own doctors. That is exactly why I created this channel. Because the conversations that matter most are often the ones nobody is having. In this video, I am going to walk you through the complete picture of how blood flow works during intimacy. What the single most common mistake is that disrupts it so dramatically. Why that mistake affects your body at a deeper physiological level than most people realize. And what you can do starting today to reverse the damage and restore full, healthy circulation. By the end of this video, you will understand your body in a way your doctor probably never took the time to explain. And that understanding is going to feel like a light turning on in a room that has been dark for a very long time. Let us start at the very beginning, because to understand what goes wrong, you first have to understand what is supposed to go right. Sexual arousal is, at its core, a vascular event. That might sound cold and clinical, but stay with me, because this is actually one of the most beautiful and intricate processes the human body performs. When you experience attraction or desire, your brain sends a cascade of signals through the nervous system. Those signals travel down through the spinal cord and reach the blood vessels in the pelvic region. In response, those vessels dilate. They open up. They allow a surge of blood to rush into the erectile tissue in both men and women, because yes, women have erectile tissue too, and that rush of blood is what creates sensation, arousal, lubrication, engorgement, and ultimately the capacity for a full and satisfying physical experience. Now here is where the story gets interesting. That entire process depends on one thing above all else: nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a tiny molecule produced by the cells lining your blood vessels. It is the signal that tells your arteries to relax and expand. Without sufficient nitric oxide, your blood vessels stay narrow. The blood cannot flow freely. Arousal becomes sluggish, incomplete, or in some cases almost impossible despite full mental desire. You can want to be there completely, and your body simply will not cooperate. That disconnect, that maddening gap between what your mind wants and what your body delivers, is almost always a nitric oxide problem. And what controls nitric oxide production more than almost anything else? Your posture and your breathing pattern. Now I want to tell you about a man I will call David. David was 43 years old, in a loving marriage, relatively healthy by conventional standards. He exercised occasionally, was not overweight, did not smoke, and had no diagnosed cardiovascular disease. But for the better part of 2 years, he had been experiencing what he described as a kind of numbness during intimacy. Not complete dysfunction, but a persistent bluntness of sensation. He told his doctor, who ran some basic blood work, found nothing remarkable, and suggested he try to reduce stress. David tried. Nothing changed. What nobody asked David about was how he spent his days. And when I tell you, you will immediately recognize this pattern in your own life. David sat at a desk for 9 to 11 hours a day. He sat with his shoulders rounded forward, his chest slightly collapsed, his head jutting out in front of his body, his hips flexed at a sharp angle, and his core completely disengaged. He did this 5 days a week after week, year after year. And every single day, he went home and sat on the couch for another 3 or 4 hours in essentially the same position. What David was experiencing had a name. Researchers call it pelvic floor compression syndrome, though it goes by various other clinical terms depending on the study. But the mechanism is straightforward, and once you hear it, you will never forget it. When you sit in that collapsed, rounded, forward-flexed position for extended periods, you are doing several damaging things to your vascular and nervous system simultaneously. First, you are compressing the iliac arteries. These are the major blood vessels that branch off the aorta and supply blood to the entire pelvic region, including the genitals. When your hips are locked in flexion and your lower back is flattened, the surrounding tissues press against these arteries and restrict their diameter. It is like stepping on a garden hose. The water pressure drops. The flow slows. Blood that should be rushing freely through your pelvic vasculature is being throttled before it even arrives. Second, and this is the part that almost nobody talks about, prolonged sitting in poor posture chronically activates your sympathetic nervous system. That is your fight or flight system. Your body reads the physical compression and tension as a low-grade threat signal. And when your sympathetic nervous system is running the show, your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest, connect and arouse system, gets suppressed. Sexual arousal is fundamentally a parasympathetic function. You cannot be in fight or flight mode and full arousal mode at the same time. The two systems are biological opposites. And if your sympathetic system has been quietly simmering all day from hours of poor posture and physical tension, switching into full parasympathetic arousal mode when you get into bed with your partner becomes genuinely difficult. Your body is still, on some level, braced, guarded, not open. Third, poor sitting posture dramatically reduces diaphragmatic breathing. When your chest is collapsed and your shoulders are rolled forward, your diaphragm literally cannot move through its full range of motion. You shift into shallow chest breathing almost automatically. And shallow chest breathing, taking small, quick breaths using only the upper chest instead of the deep belly, is one of the most powerful suppressors of nitric oxide production known to science. A landmark study conducted by researchers in Sweden found that humming, which forces vibration in the nasal passages, increases nitric oxide in the sinuses by a factor of 15. The reason this matters is that the nasal passages in the sinuses are one of the primary production sites of nitric oxide in the body. Nasal breathing, slow and deep, dramatically increases nitric oxide levels. Shallow mouth breathing, which almost universally accompanies collapsed posture, does the opposite. It starves your vascular system of the one molecule it needs most to open up blood flow. So what you have in someone like David is a perfect storm. Hours of pelvic compression narrowing the arteries. Chronic sympathetic activation keeping the arousal switch from flipping. And shallow breathing cutting off nitric oxide production at the source. By the time David and his wife were intimate in the evening, his body had been systematically undermining the biological conditions for arousal all day long. And he had no idea. Now let me bring in another story, because this is not exclusively a male experience. I want to talk about a woman I will call Sarah. Sarah was 38, a project manager, also largely desk-bound, also in a loving relationship, and also experiencing something she struggled to put into words. She described it as being present but not present, like watching herself from a slight distance. During intimate moments, she would feel mildly aroused but could never quite reach full sensation. She frequently experienced insufficient natural lubrication, which made intimacy uncomfortable, which in turn made her anxious, which made arousal even more difficult. It had become a cycle she did not know how to break. Sarah had seen her gynecologist, who suggested hormonal evaluation. Her hormone levels were within normal range. Nobody checked her posture. Nobody asked about her sitting habits or her breathing patterns. Nobody explained to her that the clitoral complex, which is far larger than most people realize and extends deep into the pelvic floor, depends on the same blood flow dynamics as male erectile tissue. Nobody told her that chronic pelvic floor tension from prolonged sitting can reduce clitoral engorgement just as dramatically as it reduces penile erection. When Sarah finally learned this, She told me it was like someone had handed her the missing piece of a puzzle she had been staring at for 2 years. Here is another layer that makes this even more compelling: the psoas muscle. The psoas is a deep hip flexor that runs from the lumbar vertebrae down through the pelvis and attaches to the femur. It is often called the muscle of the soul in yoga traditions, and there is actually a physiological reason that poetic description has some truth to it. The psoas sits in extremely close proximity to the lumbar plexus, a complex web of nerves that supplies sensation to the genitals. When the psoas is chronically shortened and tight from prolonged sitting, it can create nerve impingement in that lumbar region. This means that even when blood flow is adequate, the nerve signals responsible for sexual sensation can be muffled, distorted, or delayed. You might have decent blood flow and still experience blunted sensation because the nerve pathways themselves have been mechanically compromised. A tense, shortened psoas also pulls the lumbar spine into a flattened position and tilts the pelvis posteriorly, which further compresses the pelvic floor muscles. Those pelvic floor muscles, when they are chronically contracted from this tension and compression, cannot perform the rhythmic relaxation and contraction that is central to sexual response. In men, this directly affects erectile rigidity and ejaculatory control. In women, it directly affects vaginal lubrication, engorgement, and the capacity for orgasm. This is not a minor peripheral issue. This is central mechanics of sexual function being disrupted by a postural habit most of us begin developing the moment we start going to school as children. And now consider this. The average adult in the modern world sits for between 9 and 12 hours per day. This is the most sedentary era in human history. We were not built for this. Our vascular system, our nervous system, our musculoskeletal architecture, all of it evolved for a body that moves constantly throughout the day. The degree to which our modern sitting culture has fundamentally reshaped our physiological baseline is something medicine is only beginning to fully grapple with. And sexual health is one of the first places where that disruption makes itself felt, yet it is almost never discussed in those terms. So what do you do? Let me walk you through this in genuine detail, because I want you to understand not just what to do, but why each of these things works. The first and most immediately impactful change you can make is to break up your sitting every 30 minutes without exception. Set a timer if you need to. When it goes off, stand up and spend 2 minutes doing what is called a hip flexor reset. Stand with 1 foot forward and 1 foot back in a gentle lunge position. Lower your back knee toward the floor until you feel a stretch deep in the front of the back hip. Hold that position for 30 to 45 seconds, breathing slowly and deeply through your nose. Then switch sides. This one simple movement begins to reverse the compression of the iliac arteries, resets the psoas toward its natural length, and interrupts the sympathetic nervous system activation that prolonged sitting produces. 2 minutes every 30 minutes is not a major time commitment, but the cumulative effect over weeks and months is genuinely significant. The second tip is to become deliberate about nasal diaphragmatic breathing, especially in the hours before intimacy. Here is a simple practice that takes 4 minutes and has been shown in clinical research to increase nitric oxide production measurably. Sit or lie down in a comfortable position. Place 1 hand on your belly and 1 on your chest. Breathe in slowly through your nose for a count of 4, making sure your belly rises first and your chest stays relatively still. Hold gently for a count of 2, then exhale slowly through your nose for a count of 6. The extended exhale is key because it activates the vagus nerve, which is the main highway of the parasympathetic nervous system. Doing this for 4 minutes shifts your physiological state in a measurable, documentable way. If you do this regularly throughout the day and specifically before intimacy, you are essentially priming your vascular system for maximum blood flow. The third tip is to address pelvic floor tension directly. Most people have heard of Kegel exercises, which involve contracting the pelvic floor. But what most people with chronically tense pelvic floors actually need is the opposite. They need pelvic floor release work. A deeply effective technique is the constructive rest position. Lie on your back with your knees bent and feet flat on the floor, hip-width apart. Allow your knees to fall gently inward toward each other so they are resting together. Completely let go of all muscular effort in your hips and pelvic floor. Breathe slowly and deeply for 5 to 10 minutes. You may feel subtle releases, small movements, or a sense of warmth in the pelvic region as the tissues let go of held tension. This position mechanically offloads the psoas, decompresses the lumbar spine, and allows the pelvic floor to release. Doing this for 10 minutes before bed several nights a week can produce noticeable improvements in sensation and arousal response within 2 to 3 weeks. The fourth tip is one that surprised even some of the clinicians I have spoken with. Optimize your sleeping position. If you sleep in the fetal position, knees curled tightly toward your chest, you are spending 6 to 8 hours every night in hip flexion. You are essentially continuing the same postural compression you have been doing all day. Sleeping on your back with a pillow under your knees, or on your side with a pillow between your knees to keep your hips in a neutral position, allows the psoas and pelvic vasculature to recover and reset overnight. Sleep is the body's primary repair window. If your pelvic region is compressed even during sleep, you are removing the one period of recovery that could otherwise offset your daytime sitting habits. The fifth tip is dietary, and it works through the nitric oxide pathway directly. Nitrates found abundantly in beetroot, dark leafy greens like spinach and arugula, and pomegranate are converted by the body into nitric oxide with remarkable efficiency. A study published in the British Journal of Nutrition found that drinking beetroot juice before exercise increased nitric oxide levels sufficiently to improve cardiovascular performance measurably. The same pathway operates in sexual function. Increasing your intake of these foods, particularly in the afternoon hours before an evening of intimacy, provides your vascular system with the raw materials it needs to produce the nitric oxide that opens blood vessels and enables full arousal. This is not a supplement industry trick. This is basic vascular biochemistry, and it works. Now here is the moment I promised you. The insight that almost nobody in mainstream medicine connects to sexual health, and that I think will genuinely change how you see your body. Your jaw and your pelvic floor are neurologically and facially linked. This is not metaphor. This is anatomy. The facial system, the continuous web of connective tissue that runs throughout your entire body, connects the muscles of your jaw, throat, chest, diaphragm, and pelvic floor in a direct mechanical chain. When your jaw is chronically clenched, which it is in the vast majority of people who carry chronic stress, it creates tension that transmits down through that facial chain and arrives, literally, at your pelvic floor. Dentists and myofacial therapists have known about this connection for decades, but it almost never makes it into conversations about sexual health. If your jaw is tight, your pelvic floor is tight. And a tight pelvic floor, as we have discussed, reduces blood flow, reduces sensation, and reduces arousal capacity. One of the most counterintuitive things you can do to improve your sexual experience is to deliberately relax your jaw. Let your molars part slightly. Let the tip of your tongue rest gently on the roof of your mouth, just behind your front teeth. Let your lips be soft and barely touching. Do this consciously several times throughout the day and specifically during intimate moments. Many people who try this report an almost immediate increase in sensation and a feeling of openness in the pelvis. The body is one continuous system. You cannot hold tension in one part and expect another part to be fully free. That we have covered a tremendous amount of ground today, and I want to take a moment to bring it all home for you. The single most common mistake that cuts blood flow by 50% during intimacy is not a disease, not a medication, not an age-related inevitability. It is posture. It is the way you sit. It is the shallow breathing that comes with it. It is the chronic muscular tension that accumulates hour after hour, day after day, year after year, and quietly dismantles the precise physiological conditions your body needs to experience full, rich, connected intimacy. The good news, and I want you to really hear this, is that the body has a remarkable capacity to recover when you give it what it needs. The vascular system is dynamic. The nervous system is adaptable. The muscles and fascia respond to movement, to breath, to conscious release. David, the man I told you about earlier, made 3 of the changes I described today. Within 6 weeks, he told his wife something had shifted. Within 3 months, he described feeling more present and more physically connected than he had in years. Sarah began the constructive rest practice and the breathing work. She told me that the first time she noticed a real difference, she actually cried, not from sadness, but from relief, from the feeling of coming back to herself. Your body is not broken. It has simply been waiting for the right information. If this video helped you see something about your health in a new way, please take a second to give it a like. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need this information and are searching for real answers. Subscribe if you have not already, because we go this deep every single week on topics that matter to your health and your life. And I would love to know from you in the comments, what health topic do you want me to cover next? This community has asked for some incredible deep dives, and I read every single comment. Here is the thought I want to leave you with. The most intimate experiences of your life are not separate from your daily physical habits. They are a direct expression of them. Take care of the body that carries you through every moment of every day, and it will show up for you in every moment that matters most.